If your sexual health doesn't include pleasure, you're missing out on more than half the point. I'm Dr. Nikki. I'm a licensed psychologist and pleasure coach, and September is Sexual Health Awareness Month. This year's theme of sexual health is sexual justice. And for me and everyone here in the Dr. Nikki Knows world, if you are a pleasure pursuer, you already know that our definition of sexual health must include pleasure. Let's go ahead and get started.
Somewhere, breathe in some love. Let yourself unfold. Breathe in some love.
Good evening, and I'm so happy to be back. And I'm excited to get back into it. Let me just say, I always wanted to be truthful and honest here. At Dr. Nikki Knows, life has been lifing. Things have been exceptionally challenging in my world personally, and I know that if you are a person who watches this series, watches these live streams, follow me or in the world, you probably are also committed to bigger ideas of liberation and justice and equity and well-being. And so you were also probably like me in that respect, in that the broader that is specifically the United States and other parts of the world, it's been a lot lately. And so one of the things that I'm always trying to model for myself and honor for myself, which I think is particularly anti-capitalist, I think it is particularly liberatory, is to listen to my body. And even though I have a commitment to show up in this space and be here regularly on Thursdays for the live stream, some weeks I ain't got it. And last week was that. And it was a hard decision to make. But it was the best decision to make. My body needed that time to not be here and be present. And I'm actually proud of myself. I'm glad you're back here with me this week. We are going to spend the rest of this month talking about all things related to sexual wellness. It is Sexual Health Awareness Month. That is an awareness campaign that comes out of the World Health Organization around the month of September, because September 5th, this past Friday, is World Sexual Health Awareness Day. And so I have lots of juicy things that I want to get into over the course of the rest of the month to talk about what we mean when we talk about sexual wellness. And today I want to level set and start around distinguishing why I use the term sexual wellness versus talking about sexual health. But first, I want to remind you, I am a licensed psychologist. I'm a lot of people's therapist, but this is not your therapy. That I hope that I always bring some level of curiosity, some awareness, some affirmation, validation of your experiences. I really also hope you leave with tools that you can take and apply to your life, but it's not the same as therapy. Okay, let's just remember that. So let's get into what is the difference between sexual health and sexual wellness. I want to ask you, when you hear the term sexual health or the term health at all, what comes up for you? Is it about the optimal state of being, or is it about disease? And I think for us, especially here in this Western world, the United States, health really is not the same thing as wellness. That we really are often thinking about health as the absence of disease. And I think that if you are limiting your awareness or you're thinking about your own sexual health to only that of lack of disease, you are really limiting how you can not only evaluate your own sense of sexual health and sexual wellness, but how you can even use that as a way to help you continue to evolve, develop, expand, be curious about yourself as a sexual being. In my Voxer group, the Sanctuary Circle, we've been talking a lot this week about sexual wellness, sexual health, and I also asked them to talk about sexual liberation. Because I think that for me, if we sort of look at all of those, I can think about them as different points in the continuum, and where sexual health is, for me, the bare minimum, but sexual liberation is what we are striving for, and what we want to continue to think about how we can, as individuals, disrupt and dismantle systems when we think about sexual wellness. But for me, sexual liberation is really leaning into the imagination of thinking about what we want the world to look like with regard to our ability to show up as sexual beings, how we express our sexualities, how we experience and center pleasure. I want to continue to challenge you and challenge myself to stay so much focused beyond only looking at what is in front of us in the 3D, for so many reasons. And one is because if you only look around at what is in front of us in the 3D, things are really heavy, they're bleak, they're dark, and that there can be a real engendered sense of disappointment, of fatality, of leaning fatalism, not fatality, fatalism, just depression, right? And lots of anxiety and fear. And I think that it is exceptionally vital that we continue to think about moving beyond just stopping the harm, but thinking about what we want the other parts of our lives to look like, right? What is the evolution? And so I want us to think about sexual health as the bare minimum, sexual wellness as an optimal state with the circumstances that we have available, and sexual liberation as the imagined ideal, right? Like the goal that we're striving for. And the reason why I think that is so important is because we've talked here before, and I'll say again, that when you are pleasure centered and when you focus on being embodied in your pleasure, when you allow yourself to prioritize your pleasure center for yourself, feeling good for the sake of feeling good, up to and including erotic pleasure, it makes it that much more possible for you to imagine, for you to dream, for you to generate and live in your creativity. And when we restrict ourselves, when we keep ourselves trapped in someone else's imagination, I always say, like, the white supremacist, heterosexist, very limited psychotic imagination is the one we're trapped in. You can spend a lot of energy focused on the survival and just barely good enough, right? So let's define these terms just a little bit more, right? Oftentimes, when we talk about sexual health, the things I think most people come up with are STIs. Maybe you might include reproductive health, but I do think most people sort of think about that in a very sort of limited way. And it's like, I don't have a disease, or I do. And that the phrasing of like somebody being clean or not, like, that's a whole soapbox I can get on, right? But I really want to talk about those being sort of the minimal responsibilities that you have to be a sexually active adult, like consenting human being, right? To make sure you are aware of your health status, to have open and honest and oftentimes vulnerable conversations with your sexual partners about your health, your STI status, for you to be able to regularly get tested, to be able to disclose if you have any STIs. All of that information is really important. And I think that is really grown up important stuff. And unfortunately, we have so much shame and stigma attached to individuals' sexuality, full stop. This concept of disease is one that oftentimes gets easily connected to shame. And people will avoid those conversations because they feel ashamed or they don't want to confront it, right? And my whole thing is this is the cost of riding the ride. Like, this is what your ticket is. You have to be able to not only be aware of your disease status, but you have to be able and willing to honestly disclose that with your partners, potential partners, and ask them the same thing, right? That's really, really important. It is especially important for Black women because, unfortunately, the surveillance data that we have over the years continues to show, since at least the early 2000s, continues to show that Black women, heterosexual Black women, are disproportionately represented in contraction rates, disease rates for STDs or STIs, right? And a lot of that, I believe, is sort of the socio-cultural patterns around not wanting to have those very difficult, uncomfortable conversations because of um, issues of shame, of the stigma attached to not being good, a good girl, or being clean, all of those things that come along with maybe having an STD, STI status, right? So at a bare minimum, I think attending to your own sexual health means being willing to sort of think about that and work through your discomfort around that and hold your partners accountable for doing the same thing. Generally speaking, I want to say this is generally speaking, what we see is that oftentimes people assigned male at birth, people with penises, carry sexually transmitted diseases or infections and may be asymptomatic, whereas women, people assigned female at birth, tend to, people with vaginas and vulvas, tend to exhibit more symptomology, right? Tend to sort of bear the repercussions of having sex with someone that is asymptomatic but still transmitting, right? That's why it's your responsibility for both partners to be open and upfront and have those conversations and to have them before the genitals have touched, all right? Before that. That is the important part. That's the sexual health. I think also attending to your reproductive health, to your urogenital health, right? For you to get your regular checkups, to know what's going on, to attend to your own hygiene. We're going to actually have a whole episode about particularly Black women, vulva owners, and hygiene. Those for me are bare minimum, right? You should be able to know what is normal for your body in terms of your own genitals, in terms of your own sort of patterns and hormonal changes, in terms of what is your normal odor, what do you look like. You should be having a real relationship with her, okay? Y'all should be close. Y'all should be besties. And if that's an area that you struggle with, I want to encourage you to think about that there's some work you need to do around releasing shame around that, right? And to think about how you can reclaim every part of your body and be empowered in that. When you are fully informed and aware, then that's a place of empowerment. That is one way that we actually move through the shame. So those are the things that come up for me when I think about sexual health, okay? Bare minimum. I wonder again what you think about what that means in terms of sexual health. What do you think about, and do you have a practice where you openly and regularly talk about your disease status with your sexual partners? When in the process does that happen? Let me know. Drop it in the chats. I'm very curious to know sort of what's happening out there. Of course, we're also going to talk about having safer sex, right? So using barrier contraceptives. That includes sort of external, typically thought of as like your traditional condom. So that goes over the sheath over the penis, or internal condoms that go inside the vagina. I know that our culture, because of its heterosexist leaning, because this culture tends to be so focused on the phallus, that external condoms are so much more readily available. There's more variety. There's different flavors and textures and colors and types and all the things. They're readily accessible. But the real talk is actually internal condoms, for those of us who are vagina and vulva owners, they're way more enjoyable. They're way more comfortable. They are way less, there's way more sensory and sensitivity when those are used. right? We don't talk about that a lot, right? We're not really, as women, socialized to be responsible even for that type of barrier protection. But that is a bare minimum for sexual health, right? To be empowered in that and to be able to do that regularly and consistently for yourself, right? To be able to say, you don't get to ride this ride without some barrier protection, right? So these are the things that we want to think about. We also want to know like that all types of sexual behaviors can lead to sexually transmitted infections or diseases. That means mouth to genital, that means genital to genital, that means mouth to anus, genital to, like all the things that touch. If it's an orifice and it touches somebody else's, if there's fluids involved, there's the potential for disease transmission, right? There's actually been an uptick in throat cancer because people are transmitting HPV, which is human papillomavirus, right? That is being spread through ejaculate. So that when people are engaging in oral sex with penis havers and then swallow ejaculate, those little babies are living in the throat and they can lead to throat cancer, right? These are all things that I want us to all be fully aware of and acknowledge and not have any shame about so that we can have open conversations and we can engage in ways that allow us to experience our pleasure, our joy safely because we're coming from it from a sense of empowerment, right? So, let's talk a little bit more about this concept of sexual justice and sexual wellness, right? The World Health Organization has some components that they've laid out in terms of what sexual justice means. I want to pull them up for myself. I forgot to do this in advance. Give me 1 second. All righty. I want to read to you what they're saying for 2025 in terms of sexual justice. As this year's day. So we want to talk about, so when we think about justice, oftentimes what comes up for me is like equity, right? Justice is like that there's been a level playing field that's set. And I think that their use of the term of sexual justice this year really is important in that it speaks to the fact that there are some systemic inequities that exist globally, and that those systemic inequities really do influence individuals' experience of sexual health. And so this year, they are working to reduce stigma about improving knowledge about STIs and prevention and fostering healthy sexual relationships. The theme this year includes, where can I find this? Okay, I'm gonna have to put it in the show notes because I'm not gonna be out here looking crazy. Here we go. I finally found it. My goodness. According to the World Health Organization, sexual justice exists when all people have the power and resources to make free and healthy decisions about their bodies, sexuality, and reproduction, and have equal access to sexual health services, including education and care. Sexual justice means building a world where everyone can experience sexual health, rights, and pleasure free from discrimination, violence, or exclusion. And this year, they are focusing on 4 main themes of sexual justice. The first is sexual rights. The second is sexual and reproductive rights. The third is LGBTQ plus adolescents, transgender, gender diverse, and gay and lesbian youth. And the fourth is access to information, right? So I am doing my part here, Dr. Nikki knows, to make sure that I'm keeping you informed, right? And that we can continue to have spaces where we can get educated and have accurate information, because we know that they're part of what we're experiencing in terms of systematic inequities around sexual justice, especially here in the United States, especially here in the state of Texas that I live in, is an attack on reproductive freedoms, reproductive rights, reproductive access, that there's an attack on transgender folks, that there's an attack on queer and gay, lesbian folks, right? That these people have been labeled as threats and problems, and that is justifying not only there being social and interpersonal hate levied upon these people, but we're seeing more laws and policies being enacted, right? I live in the state of Texas, in which it is now illegal for children in schools, in public schools, to even talk about or identify themselves as non-gender conforming, as transgender, or queer, gay, lesbian, right? They actually can't talk about those things in school. And so we already know that the United States is woefully inadequate in adequate, accurate, inclusive, comprehensive sexual education. And so we really are in a time in which there are vast and deep inequities around sex, sexuality, and in specific around education, access, resources, just the right to exist in your own way, shape, and being as defined by your own terms, right? And so sexual wellness, I believe, must include justice. We cannot have any state of sexual wellness without safety, without a sense of empowerment, without advocacy, without voice. And so if we are living in a systemically inequitable state, a experience in which individuals who represent these groups are being systemically attacked and targeted, policed, made illegal, demonized, dehumanized, then we're not in a place where those folks can experience health. I'm sorry, that where they can experience safety. And the reality is, we all need to be able to level set and experience a minimal level of safety, access, and resources. That's the bare minimum, y'all. Okay. So when I talk about sexual wellness, I'm also talking about the access to be joyful and curious and adventurous and expansive, and to make a mistake and to get it wrong, and to have that be met with compassion and self-compassion, with empathy, right? To have fun in it. That for me is what I'm thinking about with sexual wellness. And the reason why I talk about safety as being so important is because you need to be able to feel safe in your own body and safe to be embodied when you are experiencing yourself as a sexual being, whether that is as in solo practice or in partnered interactions, so that you can experience pleasure. And that safety means psychological safety, but it also means overall sense of basic needs being met, right? That there's adequate housing, adequate food, that you have a right to exist, right? That the expression of yourself as a gendered being, the expression of your sexuality is not under attack. It's not illegal. It's not problematic. It's not legislated at all. That you feel like you can advocate for yourself. That if you do experience an unwanted pregnancy, that you can make an empowered decision around ending that pregnancy. That if you are a birthing person and you're carrying a child, and that pregnancy leads to some sort of physiological threat to your life or the child's life, that you also are free to make a decision about your best health needs. All of that comes down to our safety. And that is not for me to say that you're thinking so concretely and consciously about all of those things when you're engaged in any type of sexual relationship, but it means that those things are present. They might not be conscious, they might not be front of mind, but they all coalesce to contribute to your overall sense of safety, access, and your ability to then be able to experience embodied joy, pleasure, connection, intimacy, vulnerability. That's what I mean when I'm talking about sexual wellness, that all of those bare minimum things are done, that you know about your health status, that you attend to your health, that you have access to all the information you need, that who you are and how you express your sexuality is safe and accepted. And then we can talk about how we use that as a foundation to explore, expand, um, be curious about, play with our joy, connection, intimacy, and pleasure. Let me know if that is tracking for you, what you think about that distinction and that continuum. I would really love to know if this is tracking for you. Okay. And then obviously, we want to talk about why pleasure matters, and specifically about Black women being excluded from sexual health conversations. So, a little bit about my background is part of how I even got down this road um, of being a sexual wellness expert, a sex therapist, is because when I was in academia, my research and work was around, particularly, I started in sort of questioning the influence of media and specifically media portrayals of Black women in reality TV, hip hop, music videos, and Black women's identity around their own selves as sexual beings, because there was a lot of literature that was from the public health area, more so, somewhat from the psychology literature, but a lot of stuff coming out the public health literature that was demonstrating this disparate contraction rates for HIV for Black women, heterosexual Black women, as compared to other racial cohorts. And the sort of primary narrative that the scholarly research was presenting and promoting around those disparities was that Black women were engaging in risky sexual behavior, that Black women were inherently engaging in more risky sexual behavior than their other counterparts. And I started consuming that literature, and I was like, no, I just disagree. That has not been my experience as a Black girl growing up, as a Black woman. That's not been my experience of most Black women that I knew anecdotally. And I thought that it was a really biased question. I thought that we were looking that the research was looking at the question in the wrong way. And so I've done a lot of thinking about what actually happens that leads to these disparate rates of STI contraction. And I think that this ability for women, Black women in specific, to feel empowered in advocating for themselves, in feeling empowered to be able to request that their partners use condoms, to be able to have conversations about whether they are being sexually exclusive or monogamous, all of those things that are really vulnerable conversations are one things that we are not collectively socialized to do within our own communities by our elders. And two, we recognize that there are some inherent power dynamics with regard to patriarchy in relationship to heterosexual men that may oftentimes feel quite unsafe for Black women to challenge or to present those questions in a way to their partners that can feel like a challenge, that can feel like an accusation, right? If you are old enough to remember the major incident that happened in the early 2000s with Chris Brown and Rihanna, the rationale for his very violent attack on her was that she had disclosed a herpes diagnosis to him. And once people found that out, or once that sort of narrative started to take root and spread in the gossip mill, there were so many people who were like, oh, well, I understand. Like the fact that she had disclosed a herpes diagnosis to him, they thought was justification for violent attack. that speaks to the level of stigma and shame and the overburden status that Black women have in being responsible for their own sense of safety, protection, and sexual health, right? Um, the very nature of patriarchy is one that is built in with inherent violence. Period, full stop. And so when we think about women being able to advocate for themselves in intimate, vulnerable relationships, sex, being naked, sharing your body, experiencing that level of intimacy or vulnerability is one of the most vulnerable places we can be in, right? And so being able to talk through what that looks like, to be able to advocate for yourself, to know how to negotiate, all right? Because just because you ask somebody to do something doesn't mean they're going to comply and say yes. Um, Feeling like you have resources and skills to leave situations if you don't feel safe. Um, and being able to hold on to your own sense of boundaries in relationships in which you want to have intimacy and your own sexual needs met, but that you feel like you don't have to compromise about your own safety, right? The more that we can work to find ways to think about it being a dynamic, a collective sense of well-being and accountability to each other, right? That sense of wellness, that is where we have the ability to think about engaging together in ways that lead to us having safer sex experiences and ones that still embody and include lots of pleasure. Okay. But that safety piece is absolutely fundamental. One of my most popular TikToks, and one of these days I'm actually going to do a whole episode about that, maybe even a whole series, a month. But one of my most popular TikToks is me speaking to the camera, and it's also one of my like visually worst TikToks. I hate that the content is so good because the video I look crazy. I got like dark circles under my eyes. The lighting is bad. I look terrifying. But the TikTok is about be talking to women who are inorgasmic, women that have never had an orgasm, in specific, women who've never had an orgasm with partner sex. And one of the reasons why I think that TikTok has resonated over like 3 years, and why like at least weekly I see new likes or saves of that one video, is because in order to be orgasmic, in order to experience that level of heightened pleasure and release, it requires safety. You have to feel safe. You have to feel physically embodied. You have to feel empowered in order to be able to lead your body to that level of release, right? And this is where the relationship between sexual health, sexual wellness, and pleasure go so well together. We cannot have one without the other, right? That also looks like feeling safe in your own like space, right? So if you think about the overall energetic space of your environment, is it one that things are tense? Is it one where you don't feel like you have privacy or space? Is it one in which you feel like there's always chaos? Is it not clean? Do you not have all the resources you have? Like these very fundamental needs are very much interrelated and interconnected to our ability to not only have access to, but experience pleasure. And our sexual wellness is contingent upon our ability to experience pleasure, right? So when we think about this current time that we're in which we know just recently over 300,000 Black women lost their jobs. We know that the unemployment rates are the highest for Black women compared to other racial and gender cohorts. We know that Black women are and have been consistently openly attacked, disparaged, like talked about, villainized on social media every day. We know that Black women are still physically unsafe, oftentimes, and experiencing verbal violence, even physical violence, randomly by men when we don't receive their advances well out in the street, right? I see TikToks all the time of women being followed by men, women not feeling safe, right? We know what it's like to be out at night and alone as a woman, right? So all of these things are in our bodies. They don't just go away. We have a heightened sense of vulnerability and a sense of threat. And that does not play well with orgasm. And so being able to be in an environment, physical environment, in a mental state, in an interpersonal, intimate state in which safety is present is absolutely necessary. It's a requirement for you to be able to experience pleasure. Okay. And so I think we have to really think about how do we shape that things differently? How do we move forward in ways that are culturally relevant and meaningful for us? Right. And one of the things that I'm really big on is using this space to do that, to openly talk about all of these things, even if they sometimes make you feel a little squirmy, a little uncomfortable. You don't quite know, like, where to do this, if it bumps up against your respectability politics, if it bumps up against your own sort of self schema as a sexual being, that's okay. I want us to continue to do this so we can move through the discomfort and come to the other side where we think about our overall sexual wellness as being the bare minimum so that we can continue to imagine, dream, create, build, and expand a sexually liberated future. Okay? That's what I'm about. So I want to do something a little different today. I want to focus on our pleasure practice for the week because I want to walk us through something. So let's get into this week's pleasure practice.
Oh, yeah. Let yourself unfold.
So let's talk about safety and embodied safety. So one of the things I want to kind of walk us through what that might look like. One of the things that I asked in the sanctuary circle this week, that's my private Voxer group, was to ask the women in the group how and where in their bodies did they feel safe sexually, and how did they know they felt safe, and if there were parts of themselves or in their body that did not feel safe, and what did that feel like. And this is fundamentally, foundationally important because one, we need to learn, and it is a skill. We need to learn how to be conversant with our bodies. Our bodies are exceptionally intelligent. Our bodies are oftentimes communicating with us, to us, signaling to us everything that we need. However, living in this high stress, high octane, full court press, economically distressing, racially distressing, 3D reality that we live in, slowing down, capitalist 3D reality that we live in, slowing down and really listening to our bodies is difficult work. It is so easy for us to get disconnected and stay disconnected. So first, I want you to really lean into the space that you're in, right? Get comfortable. Like, if you're in a chair, really let the chair do its work. Let your body feel like the weight of your body sit in the space, be held by the chair. If you're laying down, let gravity do its thing. Let the mattress hold you, okay? Get comfortable, relax, feel connected to the earth. And then, to the extent that you feel safe, close your eyes. If you don't feel safe closing your eyes, you can always really just work or release and soften your gaze. And if you just sort of look down the bridge of your nose and just let your eyes go soft and relax, right? But really lean in to tuning in internally. And just see what comes up. The first part is just being curious and listening to your body. Seeing if there are ways that you can relax just a little bit more. That you can ground a little bit more. Can you connect to your breath? Can you slow your breathing down Can you deepen and expand your inhales? Can you lengthen and slow down your exhales? And just check in with yourself. How you feel? Is there something you need to know that you've been ignoring or haven't been paying attention to? Now I want you to scan your body from head to toe with the question, where in my body do I feel most safe sexually? And if that feels unsafe because you may have a history of sexual trauma, of unwanted touch, maybe you're not in a good grounding place in your own mental health, acknowledge that and let's look for a place where you feel neutral. Maybe you can't connect with a sense of safety and grounding, but connect to a place in your body that feels neutral or calm. Connect to as many places in your body where you either feel safe or neutral and calm. Take your time. And as you are making note of those places that you feel sexually safe, that is open to erotic touch, that you feel proud of, that you feel unencumbered by, right? However it is that you're defining feeling sexually safe, ask yourself, how do you know that? What is the sensation that feels different? What is that part of your body that's signaling to you? How is it communicating with you? So we're scanning from head to toe, just getting curious. If nothing is coming up for you immediately, that's okay. This is called a pleasure practice, right? It means we do it and we are curious about what comes up. There's no wrong answer, there's no right answer, and there's no rush. But if you're able to connect to those things, make note of it. Encourage it to continue to talk to you. Encourage those parts of your bodies to know that they are invited to continue to be safe, that you're listening to them, you will honor them, you will keep them safe. And now I want you to look at the other side. Are there spaces in your body that feels unsafe when you think about your sexuality and who you are as a sexual being? Places that feel threatened or uncomfortable. And again, if there are areas of your body or this starts to bring you to a sense of dissociation or distress because of a sexual trauma history, that's okay. Just focus on your breathing. Focus on grounding your body and bringing yourself into this present moment. And think about how you can expand your own sense of safety and empowerment and agency in this present moment. For those of you who are able to connect to areas that maybe feel a little like icky, a little discomfort, or really saying like, actually, that does feel threatening. The same thing. How do you know that? What is that part of your body telling you? What is it communicating to you? What are the sensations, the experiences, the felt sense that is being communicated to you that it doesn't feel safe? And then the last piece for this part is to ask those parts of your body, to ask yourself, what do you need to do to bring it to a place of safety? What does it need? We're asking these questions out of inherent curiosity. There are no expectations. There are no assumptions. Honor what comes up for you intuitively and honestly without second guessing. Trust in the divine intelligence of your body. Trust yourself. The making sense of it can come later. But just be open and be willing to listen. That's what we mean when we talk about being curious. You have to have like a child's mind. Think about that child that is asking, but why? And why are the stars? And why is the sky blue? And what would happen if this? That's what we mean when we talk about taking a curious stance. There's no wrong answer. They don't have enough information. Their imagination isn't tainted enough for them to even think that there's a problem with them being that curious. I want you to adopt that same way of being for yourself when we talk about tuning in and communicating with your body. And then the last piece I'm going to ask you to do, obviously, after we wrap up here, is to journal about that. Make note, okay? And I would absolutely love, and I do believe your body would love, and you very much would benefit from doing this a couple more times as the week goes on, maybe throughout the whole month of Sexual Health Awareness Month. Having a conversation with your sexual body about where it is safe, where it is threatened, what does it need, and how you can honor that for yourself. Okay? That's this week's pleasure practice. Okay? I would love for you, as always, to come back, drop it in the comments. Let me know how it went. Let me know how your body is feeling. What did you learn about yourself? Okay? How are you applying that information? What do we need to do about it? Right? Be proud of yourself for taking the moment to slow down and do it. That's important work. And remember the practice part. The more that you do it, the easier it gets, the more conversant you become, the more fluid the interchange of information, the more your intuition, your sense of attunement will strengthen, and your sense of trust and safety in your body will also strengthen, and your body will continue to trust you as well. Okay? That's it, y'all. That's what I got for today's episode. If you are interested in continuing to keep this conversation going, you want to have more access to these types of exercises and reflections, you can apply to join my Voxer group. That is the link there. That's the URL there for the application process. Remember, this is a brave space for high achieving, like-minded Black women. And so I do screen people who want to join to make sure that we're able to keep the space as brave and safe as we need to. The link will also be in the show notes and you can access it that way. There is a free broadcast channel that I just share information, tips, tools, juicy questions for thought. And then there is a subscription for $15 a month where we talk through and I give you weekly prompts, activities, things to work through and talk about. It's a small group. We enjoy the conversation. It's thought-provoking, it's affirming, it's joyful, it's fun. So there's the link for that. This is Sexual Health Awareness Month. We talked about sexual health, sexual wellness, sexual liberation. Next week, we're going to be talking about hygiene, the influence of shame and anti-Blackness on Black women's vaginal health and hygiene. We have been under attack and targeted, and it has led to lots of negative health consequences for us. And so I want to do some information. I want to provide some education. I want to talk about what is normal, what is not. I want to talk about ways to best take care of yourself from that perspective. And we're going to obviously talk about shame and releasing shame when it comes to your own relationship to your genitals. That's where we're going next week. I'm excited about it. As always, go out there, pursue pleasure unapologetically and authentically with self-compassion and love. All right. I'll see you all next week.